And welcome to the Discover History YouTube channel, and today we thought we'd go a bit medical. It can be quite gruesome, I will point that out from the very beginning, so a little bit of a warning for you. However, I am not going to perform anything that I'm talking about, and I would also recommend that you do not attempt anything that I tell you in the following video. So what we're going to look at today is something that archaeologists have found evidence for going back actually thousands of years, because we often think of medical practices as being pretty modern things, or maybe going back to at least ancient times, to Rome and ancient Greece. However, medical practices have been going on for as long as humans have been around actually. Now for this video I will be using my good friend here, which I will point out now is made out of plastic, because obviously it is illegal to have human body parts, and even attempting to sell them is also illegal. So this is my plastic friend here. And the interesting thing is, archaeologists over the years have found skulls like this one, but obviously real, with holes drilled into the top of them, and we don't really know why they're there. Now medically, especially in modern day, skulls are often drilled through to release pressure, especially if there's bleeding on the brain, things like compression, which can kill a patient, especially when blood starts to pool up within the skull. It can cloud over the brain and then finally kill it off. It will starve the brain. So it's a very serious thing, head injury, and archaeologists have contemplated over the years the holes drilled in some heads that go back right back to the Neolithic. Are these signs of operations, surgical procedures? It's a very difficult one. It could be. However, it's more likely that the person living, let's say, in the Neolithic period may have had some form of epilepsy, may have been possibly too aggressive, that sort of thing, and therefore the people, the culture at the time, may have thought that the person was possessed by evil spirits, and the best thing to do is drill a hole in the skull and release that evil spirit. So the early, what we would now call evidence for trepanning, is probably more superstition more than an actual medical practice. However, how were these Neolithic people drilling holes in people's heads? Well, what I've got here is a replica of a Stone Age drill, and it's just a piece of wood, a straight bit of wood, and you can't really find that many straight bits of wood, but we know, just like when you make spears or arrows, you can actually straighten a bit of wood, placing it over a fire and gently manipulating it into a straight line. So we've got a straight bit of wood with the bark taken off, and then on the top there we have a piece of flint, and it is actually pushed into a cut made in the wood. It's bound on there with some twine that's made out of vines or stinging nettles. It's surprising what you can make cordage from. And then it's glued into position as well to give it extra strength, using resin, a tree sap basically, and that will be enough to cut a hole in someone's head, believe it or not. Flint is extremely sharp, so you would probably cut the skin away from the top of the skull, defleshing as it's often referred to, placing this very hard piece of flint on top of the skull, and then moving it very much how you would make a fire in the Stone Age, rubbing two sticks together, except the flint in this case will start to drill and cut a hole into the skull. So was trepanning a surgical procedure as far back as the Neolithic? Probably not. It was probably for releasing evil spirits, but that's the earliest evidence we've got for drilling holes in skulls. But then when you start going forward in history, when medical care is becoming quite complicated, and we're talking about ancient Greece specifically, ancient Rome, they do start using trepans that you would recognise is in fact a drill. I have here my Roman trepan, which is obviously the same thing as what the ancient Greeks were using, and this one was made by a man that specialises in medical equipment, and we do a lot of talks. We also do a lot of school workshops because, as many of you will know, the history of medicine is actually on the curriculum. So it's quite a common workshop that we often get involved with. So look on our website, you'll find all the details on there under schools. Now, this trepan is actually a copy of one found at Pompeii in the famous medical and surgical set found there. And it's quite an amazing thing. It consists of the bow, which is very much like the bows that were being used for fire making in the Stone Age even. And also very similar to something you'll play a violin with. So you have this metalwork, a folding set of metalwork, and then you've got some thread, and then you've got the actual drill. And the way it works is you put the drill inside the bow string, so it sits like that, and then by moving the bow backwards and forwards, it will actually turn the drill. So this bronze trepan will then start cutting a hole in the skull. And we know Roman and ancient Greek medical care was second to none. It was top quality medical care. They did have some strange ideas, but people like Galen were very, very, very experienced men. Mainly because a lot of Roman surgeons had served in the army, for example, so they'd seen some horrific wounds from across the empire. You would have also found that some of the surgeons were experienced because they had worked in gladiator schools or in gladiatorial arenas, and most people used to think that everyone did this and it was death to everyone. You know, virtually everyone that went into the arena died. But we actually know there was prize fighters, and when they were injured, they were taken out and patched up with the greatest medical care. So the Romans were doing proper trepanning, and it will leave a nice, neat little cut in the skull. We do find evidence of skulls where the bone has regrown. So we know that the skeleton, the dead person, did not die of that procedure. So people did live this horrific operation, as it still is today. It's quite a tough, very sensitive operation to perform. It's working on the brain or the skull itself. By the Middle Ages, we have some horrific surgical instruments, mainly because at the fall of the Roman Empire, lots of books were lost, lots of medical instruments were thrown away. It became a dark period in medicine, really, and most people say we go back in time. What I have here is a medieval drill for drilling a hole in the head. In a way, we've gone from using bronze instruments to pretty much the same instrument that I showed you at the start. The only difference is, instead of being made out of flint, this is made out of iron, but it's used in the same way. So this is placed on the skull. Once you've defleshed it, you've cut the skin back, and then you work the drill like this, cutting a hole in the head. It will actually create quite a small hole, and we know when you do find archaeology, sometimes the skulls will have multiple holes. It will look not a neat circle, but lots of tiny little holes, and the idea is you join them all up and then you take the bone out, allowing the blood to come out of the skull, which will actually save a person's life. So you do find these little holes in a circle if you're not using a drill that cuts a clean circle into it. Once again, you do get evidence for bone regrowing. But then when you start moving through history, especially by the Tudor and the 17th century, you do get a lot of trepanning tools that look like these, which very much looks like a saw, which can actually be used as a saw for removal of arms and legs. And this is designed to trepan or cut a hole in the skull by a series of straight lines. So you are doing literally 4 cuts to create a square that you can then remove, and it will leave cut marks either side, which hopefully you can see from my plastic skull just to here. I've added that on just to explain how this works. But trepanning was a very important operation. One of the most important or most iconic people that I can literally quote from the top of my head, excuse the pun, is actually Prince Rupert. Prince Rupert, after the Civil War, when he was serving abroad, I think it was in the French army, took a gunshot wound, believe it or not, to the head, and he actually had a trepanning operation performed on him. Rumour has it that instead of putting the bone back in to rejoin, the story has it that he took a silver coin, or the surgeon took a silver coin, hammered it extremely flat and extremely thin, and then placed that inside the skull, or on the skull instead. Interesting fact about silver or silver coins is the fact that bacteria very, very rarely, if any, if I'm aware, bacteria can't grow on silver. So it's quite an important thing, replacing the bone by a piece of silver. But if you are using trepanning tools, as a surgeon would have done years ago, there's no pain relief. So you're hoping, really hoping, that the person actually passes out, because it will make your job as a surgeon much easier. By the 16th, 17th, especially in the 18th and up to the modern day, a lot of drills look like this, very much like a drill and bit that you'll find in a carpenter's set. This time the drill goes on and you turn it around and it cuts a neater circle in the air, in the head. Trepanning is still done today. It's performed for mainly compression cases in A&E or in hospitals, but it's very useful because it drains off the liquid on the brain and therefore allows the brain to continue working and keeping the person alive. Now, this has been just trepanning, as it's known, cutting the hole in the head. We've gone from superstitious reasons for doing it way back in the Neolithic to medical reasons in the modern day. So hopefully this has given you a little introduction. We do a lot on medicine. We perform all over Britain doing medicine or medical shows. So if you're interested, have a look online. If you would like me to demonstrate how to amputate an arm or a leg, or lance a boil, anything like that, do let me know by commenting. Anyway, stay safe, stay in, and see you soon. Bye bye.